What's up, Dodger fans? Welcome back to another episode of Talkin Blue. I am Cody Snavely with my co-host Vince Samperio, and it's MLB arbitration deadline day where numbers are flying, tensions rise, and rumors are getting wild. Speaking of wild, we got a lot of Bichette buzz that just won't die down, so we're going to jump all into that chaos and more. But before that, we're going to make sure we drop who this episode is brought to you by, and that's DodgersBeat.com, your go-to spot for breaking news, analysis, updates, and if you want to stay locked in on everything happening in Dodger Blue, hit up DodgersBeat.com. Another thing to pass up on here, anyone that's joining us in the live stream that wants to comment and join the chat for us and jump to the front of the line with a question and join the conversation with Vince and myself, be sure to drop a super chat. That's how we get to see your comment right away, and then we can kind of discuss it. But Vince, it's been a little bit. We are in the new year. 2025 is long gone. 2026 is here. Spring training is right around the corner. MLB offseason is still going strong, but there's still a lot of big fish out there. But before we get into all that, how have you been and how's your new year so far?
Yeah, new year. Same Dodgers so far, but good on my end. The rain in LA has, I think, stopped for the moment. We've had some sunshine the last few days, so things are on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, we're here a couple days into the new year so far. Today's the 8th while we're going live right now. I feel like we're kind of past the point where you can say Happy New Year still. I kind of, my rule of thumb, I remember Larry David has
Larry
a thing. It's
David, yeah.
usually after 3 or 4 days. I'm usually kind of very early on that as well. I work in the banking industry, so dealing with a lot of customers. I've had people say, Happy New Year on like the 5th or 6th, and I kind of give them that pause and look. I'm like, do I say it back? But I'm a kind person. But it's going by fast. Before you know it, spring training is going to be here. I know the NFL playoffs are starting right now, so that's going to be exciting. Once the Super Bowl is over, I mean, spring training is pretty much beginning for a lot of teams, and there's still a good bit of off season left. And I think the big one right now that we're getting a lot of rumors for is Bichette. So I know John Heyman, Bob Nightingale, and Ken Rosenthal, they've all put out their own rumors of what they've heard. It's all been very similar, where his market is still kind of gaining traction from a variety of teams. The Phillies, Yankees, the Cubs, and the Dodgers are among the interested parties. The Dodgers are interesting just because this is the first time, I believe, all winter that they've been concretely connected to Bichette. And it's a guy we've talked about a couple times already, you and I together, about the fit, if it makes sense, why it makes sense. I wrote about it recently on DodgersBeat.com, where it's kind of comparing him and Tucker, who fits the team long term, short term, right now, in the future. It's an interesting player. We've had a lot more rumors come out. John Heyman dropped the number figure that he's looking for, around $300 million. I'm not sure he's going to get that, but it's a starting point, I guess, for him and his agent. But you're looking at all these rumors that we're seeing out there for Bichette. Are you surprised that the Dodgers are looking at a position player on the infield rather than being not as connected to the outfield market as they were at the beginning of the offseason?
Not as surprised when you kind of consider, who it is and what it is and what the market looks like. And we talked about Boba Shed, and he makes a lot of sense and checks a few boxes for the Dodgers, other than not playing outfield. But when you look at the outfield side, it's Kyle Tucker, who we haven't heard much. It's been a slow moving market for him. I think, obviously he probably is waiting for some team to kind of throw the big money at him. And we've said before, I don't know if that's going to happen. Cody Bellinger, wants the big money. He's got a couple offers from the Yankees already, but everyone's maybe kind of waiting for a certain point or waiting for a certain thing to happen. And I don't know if that's going to happen. But on the Dodgers side, like Bichette makes sense. You add talent where you add talent, and then you figure it out later. That we've seen them do that more than a few times. And here it's not like they don't have an empty spot in the infield. Like second base is not necessarily a taken spot. Tommy Edman can play there. Tommy Edman would likely be the guy if the Dodgers don't sign anybody else, or at least early on, because he is recovering from that surgery. But it's very easy to push him to the outfield, make it work for the first couple months if he's not fully ready to go. And then, we see Bo Bichette at second base and Tommy Edman in center field. So for me, I think the Dodgers are looking to add an impact bat. And other than DH or catcher, or I guess first base, but anywhere in the infield or the outfield makes sense for them.
Yeah, I think, Bo Bichette has a lot of intriguing options about him. His versatility that he showcased at the end of the season in the World Series, playing second base, which may be the best spot for him moving forward. If you look at his baseball savant page and his defensive metrics, a lot of the reasons why he's not a good defender is due to his arm strength. So, I mean, obviously, the weakest arm in the infield is usually going to go to second base, not shortstop or third base. But I think Bichette in the future, if the Dodgers need it, could fill in innings at shortstop. That's where he's played majority of his career. Could fill in for third base after Max Muncy, if the Dodgers move on from him after this season, which is, probably I would say a high probability of happening unless we see a really good season, from Muncy if he can stay healthy, which I fully expect that he can still do. We've seen when he's on the field, he's one of the more elite third basemen in the game. But I think Bichette, in terms of the contract, before we found out the number, I was thinking he was probably going to get in the sub $200 million range. I still think that's the only amount of money he's going to get. I would be shocked if he gets over 200 million, or even if he gets anywhere close to that 300 figure that John Heyman was putting out there today. I think if I had to compare it down to between him and Tucker, I made it my thoughts on this known, where I kind of think Bichette makes more sense long term. You look at the Dodgers farm system, the pipeline, a lot of their top prospects are all outfielders, who are going to be ready to make an impact, some this year, some in 2027 and 2028. So they're kind of set there right now. They got Teoscar Hernandez locked in for another 2 years, including this upcoming season. You got Tommy Edman with his versatility, able to man center field or a corner if you need him to. And then you got Andy Paz, who's still on his pre-arbitration deal. So you got versatility and options out there. The infield for the Dodgers gets really, really thin if you look at it now and you look at it in the future. Not really many top prospects in our system or position players in the infield. Alex Friedland's probably the one that jumps out to you the most. And he got a cup of tea last year and he struggled, a good bit of that time that he was given an opportunity. And I understand it wasn't like an everyday role for him. He was switching in between, second base and third base. They kind of had him in a platoon situation as well. And he still ended up struggling a little bit. So we'll see. He had really good AAA numbers, but, Freddie Freeman's got 2 years left on his contract. Mookie Betts is on, the outside, getting close to his mid 30s now. How long can he play shortstop? We already saw his offensive numbers last year. They didn't look too good. I think adding Bo Bichette, right-handed power bat that also hits for average, he could kind of provide that offense that maybe Mookie just doesn't have anymore. And I think that makes sense for the Dodgers. Put him right in the middle of your lineup, but it also makes sense to add like a Kyle Tucker or maybe a reunion with Cody Bellinger. You get that left-handed bat put in bat in the middle of the lineup, and you also get the outfield versatility as well. So I think the Dodgers have a lot of options. I think they're just waiting, like all other teams, for one of these guys to choose in team. And it seems like Kyle Tucker is getting a little close to that. I think the Blue Jays, I'll ask you this. Do you think the Blue Jays are probably the lock for Tucker? Because it seems like if he doesn't want that short-term high AAV deal, he's not going to go to New York or LA. He may just go for the long-term guaranteed money in Toronto.
Yeah, I can't see anyone else ponying up the money for Tucker. Not that the teams don't have it, but just from what we've heard and what we've seen and what's gone on the last few years, it seems like Blue Jays are best for Tucker in terms of getting that long term deal. I sit and try to find other teams. The Cubs just made a big trade for Edward Cabrera. You would think that means that they want to continue to win, which means you think you go after a big name, and they already had Tucker. But you hear Bregman and Bichette with them more than Tucker. There's nobody else really looking or willing to spend 35 million a year more for 8 to 10 years for a guy like Kyle Tucker. So yeah, I think Blue Jays flex your muscle. You see, it worked, for the Dodgers sometimes that you can just spend the money that you have, and they're going to get a lot of it. They're going to have a renewed fandom over the next few years just based on this World Series appearance. And now, based on this, off season, they look like they're ready to go back. And, that AL East is a gauntlet, so you might as well keep adding.
Yeah, I mean, they've been adding, the reason why Bo Bichette doesn't also seem like a reunion is happening there is because they also signed, corner infielder from Japan, Akamoto. And from what we've heard from, the Blue Jays brass, he's going to be more of a super utility guy, filling in at first, third. He does have innings in the outfield as well. So if they want to get creative there, they could do that. They also have Ernie Clement, postseason Ernie, who we saw last year, front and center, almost hit the game-winning hit for Toronto, but I believe set the record for most hits in a single postseason. So clearly they want to give him a little bit of a runaway here there too. So it seems like he's going to be their primary second baseman. So you're starting to look at the roster for the Blue Jays. Bo Bichette's kind of looking like an afterthought here, which it's probably making sense why we're hearing more about his, market. I believe Heyman also dropped that he's meeting with the Phillies on like a Zoom call on Monday. They just hired Donnie Baseball to be their bench coach. That's the Toronto connection there. You can start putting some pieces together. And I feel like if there is one team that's looking for a shakeup that's willing to give, probably Bichette some of this contract that he's looking for, would probably be the Phillies, who kind of need to start making some noise in the National League. They made it to the World Series in 22, haven't done much, since then. And, they got bounced by the Dodgers, where if you ask a lot of people, especially around here, my town, it was a really close series that could have gone either way those last two games, especially with the way the Phillies pitching staff is. But other than that, with Kyle Tucker, I imagine he'll probably sign first, and then we'll probably see Bichette, especially if it's with Toronto, we'll probably see Bichette leave the Blue Jays and probably go elsewhere. It's very interesting to see what the Dodgers are going to do. It seems like after they signed Edwin Diaz, even the rumors of who they've been involved with has kind of cooled down. Brendan Donovan was a very popular name. We don't even really see him mentioned in any articles involved in trades with him. Stephen Kwan's kind of been out there, but we haven't heard anything connecting those two either. Kind of in that stage right now where we know Andrew Freeman's probably trying to do something in the background, but we just haven't seen any reports out there. So I don't know if that makes you worried or if you just trust in the process here.
I mean, I trust Friedman, not to a blind degree, but to a certain degree. And yeah, he's gonna where the Dodgers team is at right now is in a good place. Like if you start the season right now, the Dodgers are favorites to win the World Series pretty like handily, I would imagine, and especially in the NL. But also, one signing can spark a bunch of signings, and then that gets the trade market moving, and then all of a sudden the Dodgers have a new outfielder and a new starting pitcher. So like something funny happens. So yeah, I'm trusting the process. Baseball is slow. I know there was a little bit of debate with Brent Rooker and some other people the other day about like trying to find a way to make the off season a little bit more exciting or put some deadlines or whatever the case is. But we're to the point, I've said I liked it and I still like it, but I'm also to the point right now where like somebody signed.
Yeah, I think things are going to start picking up here. Hopefully this weekend. It seems like we're getting a lot more news than we did over the holidays, which was to be expected. But the World Baseball Classic starts soon. Spring training starts in less than 2 months, so I'm sure we're going to hear some news out there. Obviously, the big stuff today was the arbitration deadline. Before we get into that, though, last big rumor, kind of, Ken Rosenthal put out on his column, I believe earlier this week, kind of going over options that are available in the starting pitching market. Freddie Peralta, obviously, almost immediately after the Brewers were eliminated from the playoffs, they put Freddie Peralta's name on the open market, which makes sense. The Brewers figure they're not going to sign him to a long-term deal. He's been one of the better pitchers, not just in the National League, but in Major League Baseball the last three seasons. Had his best probably year this year, sub-3 ERA, very lows in the twos. But he put down the Dodgers as a team that's kind of lurking in the background of his market. Do you think this is more just of the due diligence from Andrew Freeman, Brandon Gomes, or do you think, they're kind of going big fish hunting in the starting pitching market, even though that's a position of strength for them? They had the Tarek Skubal rumors. Now you got Freddie Peralta. They've been throwing around in some other guys' names as well to add to that. What are your thoughts on that rumor, and do you buy it?
Yeah, I mean the Dodgers are always lurking, so I'll lead with that. But also, I feel like somebody threw the Dodgers in there, or somebody gave Rosenthal the information with the Dodgers in there for a reason. To maybe spark some other teams to be like, oh, the Dodgers can't have him too. But for the Dodgers, like it makes sense. I don't think prospect wise, it wouldn't cost as much because it is only 1 year. It wouldn't take out any other Dodgers top outfielder guys. It might be that second tier. The Brewers are trying to rebuild as well. Like not rebuild, they're trying to like just continue to grow on the fly. So they might be looking at someone like a Robleski or even a Sheehan maybe in something like this where they want someone that can help out in 2026. But yeah, I think it's more of just the Dodgers get thrown into a lot of different things that they're not always in, and but again, they are probably always in it as well because they're going to take advantage where they can. And if there's a top tier starting pitcher available and it only costs $8 million and it's only going to cost you a mid tier prospect, yeah, the Dodgers might play in on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look coming into this offseason in terms of, starters that were available in the trade market, Peralta's probably, in that tier of like where it probably can happen. Not like Scooble where it seemed like it was a long shot with the Tigers. So, well, I don't really know. If you looked at the arbitration discrepancy today, by a couple $1 million, more than a couple $1 million, maybe a trade is in his future. But you look at Peralta, even if the Dodgers were to acquire him, I imagine they would have to trade at least one of their starting pitchers in the rotation. Would you be willing to give up an Emmett Sheehan or somebody else like Justin Robleski, like you mentioned? Hell, maybe if they want like another controllable, major league, option as well. I know Tyler Glasnow's name's been thrown out there, but don't imagine the Brewers will want to eat his contract, especially with his health history. But, Peralta, for a guy that had a 2.7 ERA last year, he would probably be the fifth starter in our rotation, which is crazy. It shows how strong this rotation when healthy can be. You got Otani, you got Yamamoto, who won, the World Series MVP, 2 complete games in the postseason. Blake Snell. I mean, even without Clayton Kershaw, Tyler Glass now rounding it out. Roki Sasaki is going to get another opportunity. And then, you got Gavin Stone, River Ryan waiting for their chance to kind of eat innings as well. So Dodgers, I wonder if they're just kind of doing their due diligence, like I mentioned, just saying, you see a top player on the market, you're the Dodgers, you're Los Angeles, you have the capital to get it done. Might as well just kind of start a dialogue and see like what the general idea is. Could also just be an agent throwing it out there like, hey, look, the Dodgers are interested in this player. You don't want the Dodgers to get them. He would be their fifth or sixth starter. Embarrassment of riches. They just won back-to-back World Series. Somebody else step up. And we are starting to see some trades go down. Edward Cabrera, like you mentioned, getting shipped from Miami to Chicago. I thought the return package was pretty light for what Cabrera offers. And I think MLB, the trade simulator kind of agreed with me on that point as well. So it's kind of interesting what the starting pitching market is right now. There's not too many guys on the free agent market that I would be willing to spend. I mean, I would probably stay far away from Framber Valdez. That's just my opinion. But other than that, there's really nobody else out there. So a lot of people are going to be looking into the trade market. I just think it's a nothing rumor. I don't expect a trade for Peralta to happen at all. I don't expect the Brewers to really deal with the Dodgers in that sense as well either. Like, hey, we'll give you, a Cy Young contender. Who to a team that we just lost to in the NLCS, even though they kind of do match up and it is a business and all that stuff. But I don't see it happening. I just found it was interesting. I would rather put all my chips into the basket for a Scooble deal, even whether it's this offseason or at the trade deadline. I just feel like he's more of a needle pusher, but Peralta is going to fetch a pretty big penny too. I just don't think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I agree.
But big news today. Arbitration. The Dodgers had 4 players. They signed one of them yesterday in Brewers Dog Gratterall around I believe $2.8 million. So that got done. So Bazooka will be back. They tendered him the contract before the non-tender deadline. So we knew that was going to happen. Missed all of last season due to the shoulder surgery that he suffered, or the shoulder injury he suffered during 2024. Got the surgery, never was able to come back and make an impact this season. Should be fully ready to go this upcoming spring. Anthony Banda, fan favorite. I mean, if you look on social media, it seems like there's a pretty 50-50 divide in terms of who likes him and who doesn't like him, but he gets a contract tendered to him as well. Alex Call gets one, and then Brock Stewart, who we all forgot about, he ended up getting a arbitration deal done as well before the deadline. So the Dodgers, for I believe the 6th consecutive year, will not be going to the arbitration hearing process, which is just, in my opinion, fantastic news, just because it's a very awkward situation that you can be thrown into. Like I mentioned already, the Detroit Tigers situation, 19 million to 32 million for Scooble. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch later this month or in February, whenever those hearings take place. Are you shocked that the Dodgers, were able to come to an agreement with all those players before the deadline, or were you hoping that maybe they would try to, penny pinch Anthony Banda for a couple $1,000s?
Yeah, no, I mean, what have they done? Like one guy's gone to actual arbitration in like the last 15, 20 years, it feels like. It
Yeah.
just doesn't happen. The Dodgers get it done. Um, there's been selective outrageous, maybe too strong, but like I remember when Muncie, there were like 2 mil or 200,000 apart or something a few years ago, and they ended up it's because they were signing them to a 2 year extension or something like that. So, but we don't have to worry about it as Dodger fans. It's you hear about the arbitration process from former players, and then it makes you be glad that the Dodgers don't really have to go through that process with their guys because you're basically trying to prove why you aren't going to pay them what they think they're worth. And in that, you're telling them, oh, well, you're not good at this, you're not good at that, or you're not as good as it. It's just weird. So, yeah, Dodgers get it done, continue to get it done, especially if it's a couple 100,000.
Yeah, the Dodgers only had 4 that they had to come to an agreement with over the next, 48 hours, starting with Gratterall yesterday. At the beginning of the offseason, it was 8 players that they had that were arbitration eligible. Obviously, as the winter went along, they ended up trimming that list down. Ben Rortvedt was, they agreed to him with a deal and then traded him off or DFA'd him, and he got claimed by the Reds. Ruiz was another player. He got traded about last time we were on here. Tony Gonsolin was another guy that was on that list, and he ended up getting DFA'd as well. So the Dodgers did dwindle this list a little bit. Still had 4 solid players. Baseball offseason, if you're not invested like we are, it can be a confusing thing to explain to people because I saw a lot of people said, oh, well, I guess they're not going to re-sign Banda. I guess they're not going to re-sign Gratterall. Well, no, they already tendered them the contract way back in November. They just have to agree to the dollar figure here. If they don't agree with it, then they go to an arbitration hearing. And that's where, like you said, they meet with an independent arbitrator. You put your number, the team puts their number, and then it can be a very awkward situation for all parties involved. Dodgers, last time they did it was 2020. They went with 2 players, Pedro Baez, infamously slow windup to get a pitch across the plate, drove me crazy, but was good in spurts throughout his Dodgers tenure. And then Jock Peterson, who was probably the most polarizing, Dodgers player in terms of statistics, whether he was hot or cold, but everybody loved him. So that's the last time they went through the arbitration process. I know with Peterson, it was very awkward that 2020 offseason because he got traded, then he didn't get traded, then they went to arbitration, and they ended up winning a World Series, and he was a big part of that. Had that really big home run off Tyler Glasnow in the Fall Classic as well. So I think it's a big deal. The Dodgers got this all wrapped up, ready to go. Now they can focus on the rest of their roster because, like I said, there's only a couple weeks until spring training starts. So they got to kind of start, the roster looks good on paper, like they're a World Series favorite, but we're spoiled. We want them to go get another big fish to add to this lineup. And I still think there's about probably 1 or 2 moves that need to get done, but getting the arbitration guys locked up and not having to deal with any of that, I just feel like is a big move for the organization.
Yeah, you got a couple moves to be made, a couple of non-roster invitees to spring training. That'll be interesting names. That'll end up being depth. And I think that's kind of where we're at with them is building the depth rather than building like, one guy in the lineup. Then after that, it's just like, what's Kim going to do? What's Rojas going to do when, if Kike is coming back, when is he going to be ready? Kind of, what Rushing going to do? Is he going to play, 3-4 times a week? Which they've kind of talked about maybe giving Freddie some days off. So there's just a lot of smaller questions.
Yeah, and I will say the one guy that I've kind of been surprised with in back-to-back off seasons that they ended up not cutting him loose, not just for playing ability, because he's been above average since joining the Dodgers. That is Banda. I know he's a fan favorite, but in terms of roster flexibility, he's very, very tight. Doesn't really help the Dodgers out in that sense. Doesn't have any minor league options, so he pretty much has to be on the roster unless he's injured. So when that comes into consideration down the line, when a lot of these pitchers are healthy, like Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Kyle Hurt, if they bring back, you know, Evan Phillips to a 1 year or 2 year contract and he comes back in the second half, you're going to have to start making some roster cuts here because this pitching staff, it's not just the rotation, the entire organization. They got guys that are ready to pitch, that are ready, that have that flexibility of being optioned up and down between the minor leagues. We've seen them do it with Bobby Miller. We've seen them do it with Landon Knack, Justin Robleski, all these guys. That's something that this team loves. Banda doesn't really give you that, gives you the optionality with the left-handed side, but you also have a couple good left-handers in your bullpen already, and Tanner Scott, who we expect to have a rebound year, and then Alex Fessy as well, who's, you know, making his way back to returning to the Dodgers, you know, by opening day. So we'll see what happens there. In case if anything happens, maybe he could be a DFA candidate if they make a couple more signings here or there. But not much else has really happened on the Dodgers transaction front across baseball. It's been extremely slow. I know a lot of people are frustrated about that, and that's where you brought up the Brent Rooker tweet about, you know, making free agent deadlines. It's all nonsense. They're never going to do that. The MLBPA is way too powerful, and I'm in favor of that. I think the players should have those rights to choose and pick when they want to sign. They're all going to be signed by February. I mean, we all just got to wait, put out the waiting game. Go spend some time with your family, go cook a dinner, go out, enjoy, watch a movie. Avatar's like 3 hours long. Go watch that a couple times this week. You know, have fun. Everyone will be signed by spring training, hopefully. No lockouts this year where they're going to go into the regular season, hopefully. But yeah, other than that, there's
Yeah, if
really
you
not
don't
much
work in
else.
sports, what does it
Yeah.
matter when they
Yeah.
sign?
Yeah. If you're just not like
Well,
us
I guess,
watching and waiting for the
Yankee
moves.
fans, I get it right now though, because I'd be mad if I was a Yankee fan. Like, bro, what are we gonna do? But we've been there as Dodger fans too. And then the Mookie trade was in February when they ended up trading for Mookie. So
Yeah, big things can happen, especially as the spring training gets close, because that's when, you know, teams like the Dodgers, they've already said that they want to make sure everything's locked up and ready to go. Um, but other than that, there's been a couple cool, interesting rumors out there. One of them that I'm going to go to that's more Dodgers related is the story from The Athletic that NBC and Peacock has actually kind of zeroed in on Clayton Kershaw potentially joining their broadcast booth. If nobody keeps up to date with it, we also have this article up on DodgersBeat.com. It's also out there. You know, look it up on Google, Twitter, all that stuff. Shifting of the broadcast networks for Major League Baseball is happening next year. ESPN no longer gets Sunday Night Baseball. They no longer get the first round of wild card playoff games. It's going straight to NBC and Peacock. So potentially we're going to be seeing some, you know, new player commentators, color commentators, sideline interview reporters. So they're trying to build their teams for that right now. So, and Clayton Kershaw has been a player that they have circled to have potentially join the network. Are you in favor of it? And do you think it will happen? Because I remember what Kershaw was very adamant about saying during his retirement conference was that he's going to spend these next, you know, couple years prioritizing his family. He doesn't really want to care about baseball too much, but interesting story nonetheless. What are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, we've seen lucky and unlucky, I guess, depending how you feel about it. With Kershaw being injured the last few years, some of the time over the last few years, we've gotten to see him in the booth with Joe Norrell or whoever's in the booth, or we've seen him take on a lot more of those player interviews when they are on ESPN or Fox or whatever it is. And he's been pretty good. Like, he's been entertaining. Obviously, he knows the game. He knows baseball, and he has a pretty good mentality when it comes to what a pitcher's trying to do, what a hitter's trying to do. He thinks on both sides. So in that aspect, yeah, he'd be entertaining. I think the other name was Joey Votto that was kind of floated out there. That'd be another great one to have. He's a good personality. But yeah, for Kershaw's side, I don't know. Like, obviously, these teams spend a lot of money, so they're gonna continue to spend a lot of money. I don't think Kershaw cares really about the money, anyways. But maybe if it's a once a week gig and he only has to fly, on Saturday night to a city and fly back Sunday night or Monday morning, maybe he's cool with that. He doesn't miss, the kid's week, and maybe he's in a few production meetings or whatever, but nothing too crazy. I'd want it to happen, but I don't know how viable it is, at least in this first year. Like, yeah, if I was Kershaw, I would be like, nah, I'm good, bro. Call me back in like 2028.
Yeah, I'm interested if it's more of a full-time role or if it's just like, you know, a game here and there. I would imagine if they get him it would be if they're playing in like Rangers, like somewhere in Texas, Houston, all that area, or if it's like a specialty game that involves the Dodgers. One of the things I pointed out, I believe opening day is
Yeah.
broadcasted by NBC this year against the Diamondbacks. So that would be, the entire, the banner celebration, I believe is game one. And then game two is the ring ceremony. So, Kershaw's obviously going to be in LA, I would assume, for those, that series. So he would be there. Maybe he drops by on the broadcast, does, something there along those lines. I'm going to say probably more no than yes, just because of everything I mentioned before. Wants to be a full-time dad now. His playing career is over. He's probably baseball's on the back of his mind right now. But a lot of players, they say, once you retire, it's all you're thinking about. So maybe Kershaw really wants to get back into the swing of things, doing it from the other side of the coin now in the media and broadcast, scape. And I do enjoy the conversations that he's had with Sportsnet LA or the broadcast reports with during the postseason in years that he's been out for that period of time. So he's an interesting character, has really good dry humor. We've seen the interviews with David Vassay in the post games when they've been in the clinching environment. So you get a lot of unfiltered responses there. But I think Kershaw would be awesome in the role, like he's been in his entire career. But we'll see what happens, I guess, with that. I'm interested to see what
Maybe
other
Ellen gets
players they try
tired
to
of
do.
him, and it's just like, you know what? Go ahead, Clayton. Go call some
Yeah, I'm
baseball games.
interested to see because I feel like baseball broadcast, and now that there's like that switch up, NBC probably has to do something that gets people's attention to say, this is why they bought, they went hard and got the package that they bought for the next couple of years. So if it's not Kershaw, then who else? Like make it intriguing, make it worthwhile for me to even listen and not to just mute the TV and just listen on the radio or something.
Yeah,
So
or if it's
it'll
like
be
studio
interesting.
show, you got to compete with Fox, like
Yeah.
Poppy, Jeter, A Rod. You know, Kershaw Vado's a decent start to combating something like that. So
Yeah, so we'll see what Kershaw does with that. I imagine we'll probably get more concrete knowledge of that, especially as opening day gets near. Like I said, the Dodgers, they play NBC's first game with that new system in place. Kind of closing it out on this a little bit before we decide to go live. The Athletic posted an article, Evan Drellich, who's doing a lot of the MLB deep dives, especially that concern the commissioner Rob Manfred. This one goes about the commissioner kind of getting ready for his retirement. His contract expires, I believe, in 2029. So we got a couple more seasons to go. He kind of went over his goals and what he wants to see implemented and what's been talked about. The big one is the expansion to 32 teams, which I do think is inevitably going to happen, very similar to what the NFL has with the 32 teams. And they want to do the division realignment, which would give you 4 divisions with, I believe, 4 teams in each. So very similar to the NFL, wants it to be more regionalized. I'll go with you on this. The first part, with expansion, division realignment, we've seen some crazy ones out there that kind of break up rivalries, kind of splitting up the American League and National League. I'm a purist. I think the system that they have right now is almost as perfect as you can get it. It's what I've grown up with. Adding the wild card teams here and there is fine. I think you can do it. I think what they have it now is the maximum is what I would allow. But if realignment happens, that's where you start to get me a little bit off base. Are you kind of in that ballpark, or are you open for like new opportunities for the league?
yeah, I want the 2 extra teams, but there's really no way to add 2 extra teams without having unbalanced divisions or like some weird stuff going on. So it's kind of I think about realignment has happened before, and you talk to an older Dodger fan, and the Braves are like one of their biggest rivals because the Braves used to be in the West, and the Dodgers would have to battle with them. I just think like it would be weird. You lose the Rockies, which wouldn't be a big deal in realignment, probably. Other than you get to play the Rockies more times than other teams. Like adding a team like the Angels or the A's when they move to Vegas, it would just feel weird. But I think for the Dodgers' sake, the fact that California already has so many teams and the fact that 3 of those 5 teams are already in their division, I think you just lose the Rockies. I think it's not terrible. But for some of these other like divisions and everything else, yeah, it gets a little hairy.
Yeah, I think Manfred, to his credit, did like if there's a teams that are in the same city like New York, LA, like he wants to keep them in separate leagues. He doesn't want to put them in the same division, which I think if you look across every other sport like the NFL, there's two New York teams, there's two LA teams, they're in separate conferences. The NBA, it's very similar to that as well. MLB, they've done it. All their teams are that are in the same city are in a different league. So you got the National League, the American League. Um, so I don't think much would change on that front. That's where my thing with like baseball history, where it's like, all right, if these teams have been in the American League for years, decades, like I find it hard to say, you know what, now they're a National League team. I was okay with it with the Astros just because those National League teams with the extra, team in their division looked weird on paper. You're looking at it, you're like, all right, we got to kick one to the American League. Let's make this thing make sense. And for the Astros, luckily for them, they were pretty bad for most of their history. And we remember them now as the American League team that's, been going into the World Series for a couple of years, been a World Series contender, cheating scandal, all that stuff. That's all remember from when they are in the American League, not the National League. So that's fine there. The other thing that was added to this was trying to kind of keep eyes on the league, and that's where they were thinking about doing split season. If nobody watches minor league baseball religiously, that's what they do. They have a first half champion, and they have the second half, champion. That's how they determine how the playoffs work. Don't think that Major League Baseball will go that crazy, just because I don't think many people would be on board with it. The other thing would be saying doing an in-season tournament. I think this is interesting if it's not like what the NBA does. If they do it what the NBA is doing with in the middle of the season, which seems like the NBA, they want more eyes on those types of games. I go on social media when I believe the other one just happened recently, a couple weeks ago, gets clowned on. Nobody cares. Nobody's raising the banner for that thing. I think even one of the owners that won it before this year, they were like, we're not raising the banner for this. This is just a regular season award. So,
Lakers
um,
did it the first year, but I think they were forced to.
yeah. So I don't like that, but I think you can get interesting with it, especially when it revolves around the All-Star game and All-Star weekend and the break itself. One of my ideas that was pitched out there, the World Baseball Classic, so popular. Why don't you do some type of mid-season tournament between international players and then the United States players? They do it with the prospect showcase where it's usually world versus USA. Could do something like that for the All-Star game. Or if you really want to get creative, take what they do in the WBC. Usually takes around 2 weeks to get complete, do it for the All-Star week and have them do like single game eliminations throughout the entire thing. That could be fun. And I think a lot of people will be on board with that as well. I don't think the teams would be on board with it doing something like that in the middle of the season. We've seen the Dodgers slow play it. A lot of other teams do it as well. But are you on board with some type of mid-season, tournament? Would you change something? Is there something like what I said that would make it something that you could be on board with, or are you kind of off base on this as well?
Yeah, based on what or how the in season tournament in the NBA came about was just like people got tired of the regular season. Like doesn't matter. Blah blah blah. Half the teams didn't make the playoffs. Baseball's not there yet. The regular season does still matter enough. The Dodgers are trying to prove that, like, not otherwise. You should have to make the playoffs, but it's a lot different than it was before. Anything international, I'm gonna have some kind of buy-in. Obviously, World Baseball Classic is fun. I've been to at least one game in almost every single one. Um, if you can find a way, like this, kind of sets it up to Olympics every 4 years. Baseball is like voted on every time. So it is going to be in LA, but it wasn't in the last Olympics, or it wasn't last Olympics, whatever it was. But like then you open it up, like, okay, and when the Olympics are here, we do already have that break built in. If World Baseball Classic times, we do already have that built in. We saw the success in hockey with their Four Nations. Like that was a lot of fun, and maybe a lot of people that don't normally watch hockey were into that. Just it's easy to get you to root for your country or against another country, whatever it is. So, but I think right now, like I think baseball's in a good spot where you can clean up All Star Week a little bit in terms of some other stuff, or actually make it a week, not just 2 days. But I think, yeah, I don't have any strong against it, but I don't have anything really like, oh, I want to see that.
Yeah, I think, call me biased. I think what the MLB is doing right now is really good. I think they're marketing the players really well. I know a lot of people were clowning on the Shohei Ohtani 1-7 day yesterday. I thought it's smart. They know it's smart from their perspective because he's the most popular player in the sport. um, they're doing a lot of good things right over the last couple years. And I think if you ask a lot of people, a lot more people are watching baseball than they were 10 years ago. And I think the Dodgers are a large part for that. The Yankees making in the World Series 2 years ago is a big reason for that as well. Parity in the sport, as much as a lot of people are going to say the Dodgers are ruining it, there is a good chance that a lot of other teams that we're not giving credit could have a good postseason, good stretch of 12 games, and they're World Series champions. I mean, we saw the D-backs make a run. We saw the Phillies. They were like an 85 win wild card team a couple years ago. They made it to the Fall Classic. So I think you get a lot more eyeballs on it. I would say right now, just it's like NFL, MLB in terms of that tiers right now. NBA is kind of losing a lot of traction. Hockey's never really caught on in the States like that, at least around where I live, even with the Flyers and all that. So uh, I just feel like MLB, they're going to try to do things that are going to make them more money and make them more popular. In season tournament could be a fun idea, fun concept. I'm not sure that they're there for that idea yet to where they need to do it. At the end of the day, they may just have to reduce the 162 game season, make it maybe 150 games, something along those lines. But the caveat to that is if they reduce the amount of games they're playing, owners are going to say, well, then we don't need to pay these players as much money. So then you're getting more battles between the owners and the MLB Players Association, which at the end of the day doesn't, help anything out. I think the way the sport is right now, the amount of playoff teams, the way the divisions are aligned, the 30 split, 15 in the American League, 15 in the National League, all that stuff. I think it's perfect. I would leave it the exact way that it is right now. I would even take away, the extra wildcard spots if that was me. But, I think what they have going on right now is perfectly fine as well. But Rob Manfred's going to try to do some things. And to his credit, I've made this argument before. He gets shit on a lot, but I think he's done a lot of good things for the game. Pitch clock. At first, everyone was complaining about it. Do you notice it anymore? No, you don't. And it's actually helped me watching a lot of these games, especially being on the East Coast. It's helped a lot of casual fans and their audience watch the games. So that's probably the biggest W from his tenure as the commissioner. Obviously, the biggest fumble is the Astros thing, but even with each passing day, you kind of start to forget that a little bit as well. But other than that, any other takeaways from the article or Rob Manfred, his tenure, your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, not always not very positive for Manfred, but it does stem a lot from some of the stuff that we went through personally as Dodger fans. But yeah, so I mean, they're trying, and I think that's a big thing, and the fact that they kind of messed up the minor leagues a little bit, getting rid of a bunch of teams, maybe taking some teams out of some small towns that needed it. But they, kind of picked it back up with the one of the independent leagues that they kind of turned into their league where they try out a bunch of rules and hey, we're gonna get automated balls and strikes. We're gonna get the pitch clock's done really well. There's little things here and there. I think even you could argue that the lottery for draft picks is a good thing. It's not as NFL, NBA, there you can change a lot with one draft. With obviously MLB, you can, but it might not happen for 3, 4 years down the line. But I do think like teams that are bad for multiple years, they just can't keep picking in the lottery, and I like that part of it. Maybe they could amp that up even a little bit more to prevent people from trying to quote unquote tank. But you can see that one guy can change the things a little bit, like Paul Skeens. The Pirates are spending a little bit of money now and trading for a guy that can help in their lineup. And, they're at least trying to put a competitive team. You really only need 85 wins to be right in the mix for in a playoff spot every single year, year in and year out. So I think there's been a lot of positive. Obviously, baseball been helped by the fact that they just have a lot of young talent right now that's been fun to watch. Some of it Manfred's backed into, some of it whoever is all a part of their committees, they're doing some things. But I like the fact that they're trying, and baseball is in a good spot, and hopefully continues to grow.
Yeah, I'll end it on this with Manfred. A lot of it stems on what happens next year. The offseason is going to be big
Yeah.
once the CBA expires in December. If you get a really long lockout between both sides not agreeing anywhere close to each other, I mean, hell, it's your job to, yes, you work for the owners, but it's your job as the commissioner of the sport to make sure both these sides can come to some sort of agreement. So, depending on how the lockout goes, like we thought it could have been a lot worse the last time out in 2021, that off season or to leading into 2022. It ended up only just didn't miss a single game, just delayed spring training a little bit. And, they played a little bit faster and the season went into November a little bit. But other than that, I think we'll see what happens with Rob Manfred next year in the MLB Players Association and the owners, all that stuff. So that'll be fun. But there's really nothing else to talk about from this week. We're still hearing a lot more rumors. We're going to hear them more throughout the weekend as well. Obviously, if some big news happens in some capacity, we'll be here on the channel, whether it's Talkin Blue or the Believe Those podcast. All of us will be ready in some form to get that news out to you and break it down. Hopefully, we're talking about something big in the next couple days, maybe week. But I'll give the Dodgers time to think about it a little bit more. Any closing thoughts before we get out of here and kick it on off to the regular network programming for the offseason?
No, I got no strong closing thoughts, so we'll just end it with I enjoy when the Dodgers win the World Series because it gives me an excuse, more of an excuse to just wear Dodger gear every day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. It also makes me, even with the slow off season, I'm just like, you know what? I trust them. They just won the World Series. We'll see what happens. So hopefully everybody else can take a little bit of that note as well. But that'll be it for this episode. Thanks for everybody that joined the live stream. If you join after, make sure you comment, like, subscribe. That definitely helps out the channel. And then we will see you next week, hopefully with some more news to talk about. But that'll be it for this one. We'll see you next time.